It begins like a plot twist in a Cold War thriller. Secret experiments, mind-altering drugs, government agents watching behind one-way mirrors. But this isn't fiction. It's a historical fact. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA launched a clandestine program known as MK Ultra, aimed at exploring techniques to control and manipulate the human mind. Under the pretense of national security, American scientists and intelligence officers orchestrated an array of experiments, some bizarre, others outright inhumane, on both willing and unsuspecting subjects. From unknowing civilians dosed with LSD in public to psychiatric patients subjected to psychological torture, MK Ultra shattered ethical boundaries and plunged deep into morally treacherous territory. For decades, the truth remained buried under classified documents and deliberate obfuscation. When fragments of information were finally declassified, what emerged shocked the public. A vast, coordinated effort to weaponize the mind, often without consent and without oversight. Though it may sound like science fiction, MK Ultra is one of the most chilling and real chapters in American intelligence history. A story of ambition, paranoia, and abuse that still echoes in the shadows of government secrecy. To understand MK Ultra, we must first understand the era in which it was born. In the early 1950s, the Cold War had cast a long shadow over global politics. The ideological battle between the United States and the Soviet Union extended far beyond nuclear weapons. It penetrated the realm of psychology, propaganda, and fears of brainwashing. The term brainwashing gained traction after the Korean War, when captured American soldiers were accused of being re-educated by their captors to denounce the US and praise communism. These shocking cases raised deep concerns in Washington about the potential for psychological manipulation. Enter Allen Dulles, appointed director of the Central Intelligence Agency in 1953. Dulles was convinced that the Soviets, Chinese, and North Koreans were already experimenting with mind control techniques. He feared that America was falling behind in what he saw as a psychological arms race. That same year, he approved the creation of MK Ultra, a covert project overseen by the CIA's technical services staff designed to explore every possible method of influencing and controlling the human mind. The name MK indicated that it fell under the agency's technical services division, while Ultra was a nod to the highest level of wartime secrecy, echoing the British intelligence designation for code-breaking during World War II. This was a signal. MK Ultra was not just another intelligence initiative. It was classified at the deepest level. The scope was breathtakingly broad. According to surviving records and testimonies, MK Ultra sought to investigate dozens of techniques: hypnosis, sensory deprivation, drug-induced psychosis, electroconvulsive therapy, and subliminal messaging, among others. It operated through over 80 institutions, including universities, hospitals, prisons, and research foundations, many of which had no idea the CIA was funding or directing the experiments. From the outset, secrecy was paramount. Even within the CIA, knowledge of MK Ultra was limited to a small inner circle. Paper trails were minimized, contracts were obscured, and funding was laundered through front organizations. The objective was simple: discover how to break a human mind and reprogram it. What lay beneath the MK Ultra umbrella was a network of secretive and ethically grotesque experiments, each designed to erode the mind and reshape behavior. Conducted under a cloak of national security, these operations were far-reaching, sometimes fantastical, and often cruel beyond belief. The CIA's obsession with LSD stemmed from its mind-altering properties and the belief that it might serve as a tool to manipulate, interrogate, or destabilize individuals. Rather than conduct controlled clinical trials, the agency engaged in reckless and often cruel experiments. The drug was administered to thousands of people without their knowledge or consent. These included prison inmates, hospital patients, military personnel, and civilians going about their daily lives. In many cases, individuals were dosed in public places, bars, cafes, parks, so that agents could observe their reactions in real time. Others were given high doses repeatedly over prolonged periods. The effects were unpredictable and often terrifying. Hallucinations, paranoia, psychological breakdowns, and in some cases, long-term mental damage. The most infamous victim was Dr. Frank Olson, a government biochemist. After being covertly dosed by his colleagues, Olson began to experience severe paranoia and emotional distress. 9 days later, he fell from a 13th-story window in Manhattan. The CIA initially claimed it was suicide. Decades later, amid mounting public scrutiny, Olson's family received a formal apology and financial compensation, though many still suspect foul play. The LSD experiments revealed the CIA's willingness to abandon ethics in pursuit of results. It wasn't just the drug being tested, it was the very boundary of human rights. Another disturbing realm of MK involved experiments designed to disassemble a person's sense of reality. Subjects were placed in isolation chambers or float tanks for hours, even days. Sometimes they were restrained or administered paralytic drugs, rendering them unable to move or speak. During this sensory vacuum, they were bombarded with loops of repeated audio messages, often simple phrases intended to influence belief or behavior. The goal was to induce dissociation, to erase prior mental conditioning and install new programming. CIA operatives theorized that under these extreme conditions, subjects would become more suggestible, perfect candidates for hypnosis. Hypnosis was explored as a means to create Manchurian candidates, individuals who could be programmed to carry out missions without conscious awareness. While some of these goals bordered on science fiction, they were taken seriously by the agency. Declassified memos reveal experiments aimed at inducing multiple personalities, manipulating memory, and even producing amnesia on command. The human toll of these experiments remains difficult to measure, as many victims never even knew they had been part of a study. Perhaps the darkest chapter in MKUltra's history unfolded not in military bunkers but in hospitals, places where vulnerable individuals sought healing. In Montreal, Canada, the CIA funded Dr. Ewan Cameron, a world-renowned psychiatrist at the Allen Memorial Institute. Under the guise of treatment, Cameron subjected his patients to a nightmarish regimen. He developed a technique called psychic driving, which involved putting patients into chemically induced comas for weeks. During this time, they were exposed to continuous audio recordings, loops of repeated statements played through speakers, headphones, or even pillows. The messages were intended to overwrite the mind. In conjunction, Cameron used massive doses of electroconvulsive therapy, far exceeding the safe or standard limits. Patients were often left unable to walk, speak, or remember their families. Some regressed to a childlike state. Others lost all sense of identity. Most tragically, many of these patients had been admitted for minor issues such as anxiety or postpartum depression. Cameron's work, funded by the CIA through front organizations, epitomizes the moral collapse at the heart of MKUltra. These were not enemy combatants or intelligence targets. They were ordinary people seeking help, and they were destroyed in the name of science. Among MK Ultra's many disturbing initiatives, none combined voyeurism, vice, and psychological manipulation quite like Operation Midnight Climax. Beginning in the mid-1950s, the CIA set up a series of safe houses in San Francisco and New York, disguised as brothels. Sex workers were recruited and paid by the agency to lure men into these locations, typically bars or apartments outfitted with one-way mirrors. Once inside, the unsuspecting men were surreptitiously dosed with LSD or other psychoactive substances. Meanwhile, CIA operatives sat behind the mirrored glass, observing and documenting the effects of the drugs in real time. The ostensible purpose? To understand how people behaved under chemical influence, particularly in compromising or sexually charged situations. In practice, it became a blend of pseudo-scientific experimentation and ethically bankrupt entertainment for some involved agents. The safe houses were equipped with recording devices, hidden cameras, and concealed microphones. According to declassified documents, the program ran for over a decade, with little oversight and virtually no accountability. Many of the men who were drugged and watched had no idea they had been part of a government operation. Even within the CIA, some officials considered Operation Midnight Climax to be a grotesque abuse of power. Yet, it continued for years, protected by bureaucratic secrecy and the broader culture of impunity that MK Ultra thrived within. When later exposed, this sub-project became emblematic of the ethical void at the heart of the entire program, the willingness to sacrifice individual rights and dignity in the name of national security. MK Ultra remained a closely guarded secret throughout the 1950s and 60s. It wasn't until the early 1970s, amid the turbulence of the Watergate scandal and growing public distrust in government, that cracks began to form in the program's veil of secrecy. In 1973, then CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MK Ultra records. Thousands of documents were shredded in an effort to erase any trace of the program's darkest activities. But a few files survived. In 1975, investigative efforts by the U.S. Congress, most notably through the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission, finally brought MK Ultra into the light. These investigations revealed that over 150 sub-projects had been conducted under MK Ultra, many involving human experimentation without informed consent. The sheer scope and unethical nature of the project horrified the public. Whistleblowers and journalists played an essential role. Former CIA employees and victims came forward, telling stories of psychological damage, betrayal, and lifelong trauma. Lawsuits followed, including one brought by the family of Frank Olson, the biochemist who died after a covert LSD dosing. Though they eventually received a settlement, the true circumstances of Olson's death remained contested. The revelations sparked national outrage and prompted new regulations around human experimentation. Institutional Review Boards, IRBs, became standard for federally funded research. The scandal also prompted Americans to question the limits of intelligence work and the lack of accountability in agencies operating under the guise of national security. Yet, even today, much remains unknown. The destruction of key documents means that many victims have never been identified, and numerous sub-projects remain shrouded in mystery. The story of MK Ultra is not just one of scientific overreach. It is a chilling reminder of how secrecy can enable abuse, and how fragile the line is between protection and violation. Officially, MK Ultra was terminated in 1973, the same year most of its documents were deliberately destroyed. But its consequences didn't end there. For the victims, the trauma often lasted a lifetime. Many never knew why their lives fell apart, why they developed sudden mental illness, paranoia, or memory loss, because they were never told they had been part of a secret government experiment. The case of Frank Olson became a national symbol of that hidden suffering. His family's decades-long search for truth led to multiple investigations, a public apology from President Gerald Ford, and a financial settlement. But no one was ever prosecuted. No agency officials were held accountable. And to this day, many of the individuals behind the experiments remain unnamed. Beyond the personal tragedies, MK Ultra left a lasting institutional scar. Public trust in the CIA and in the US government's commitment to ethical standards was severely damaged. The revelations triggered broader demands for transparency in intelligence work and scientific research, and contributed to a new era of government oversight. In 1977, a cache of surviving MK Ultra documents was discovered in a financial records building, prompting renewed congressional hearings. These records provided further confirmation of the breadth and brutality of the program. They also highlighted the difficulty of holding covert agencies accountable, especially when their operations are buried beneath layers of classification and plausible deniability. MK Ultra's aftermath is not just historical, it reverberates in current debates about surveillance, psychological warfare, and the ethics of emerging technologies. The question it leaves behind is enduring. What happens when power is unchecked, when secrecy shields atrocity, and when science is weaponized not for healing, but for control? MK Ultra's eerie legacy didn't end with lawsuits or Senate hearings. It seeped into the cultural imagination. Its disturbing premise and secretive nature made it ripe for adaptation into novels, films, television series, and conspiracy theories that persist to this day. In literature, Stephen King's Firestarter revolves around a secret government experiment that gives a child pyrokinesis, clearly inspired by MK Ultra's rumored psychic programs. The CIA-like agency in the book is shadowy, ruthless, and unaccountable, much like the real-life forces behind MK Ultra. On television, the influence is even more explicit. Stranger Things draws directly from MK Ultra, with the character 11 having escaped from a government lab where children were subjected to experimentation to develop telekinetic abilities. The show references the real program by name, rooting its sci-fi horror in historical fact. Films like The Men Who Stare at Goats parody the idea of psychic soldiers and secret US military experiments, while conspiracy theory uses MK Ultra as a backdrop to explore themes of surveillance and psychological manipulation. Even the Jason Bourne series, with its amnesiac assassin molded by covert conditioning, echoes MK Ultra's ambition to program operatives. More broadly, MK Ultra has become shorthand in the public consciousness for secret government overreach, used in documentaries, video games, and countless internet forums. It lives on in hashtags, in music lyrics, and in the minds of those who question how far the state is willing to go in the name of control. But unlike typical conspiracy theories, MK Ultra was real. That fact blurs the line between paranoia and truth, making it all the more powerful and all the more haunting in the stories we continue to tell. MK Ultra forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, not only about history, but about human nature and institutional power. This was not the work of fringe radicals or rogue agents. It was an orchestrated effort, sanctioned by the highest levels of American intelligence, to explore the dark edges of science in pursuit of control. It showed how fear, especially during times of geopolitical uncertainty, can justify almost anything, how secrecy can corrode accountability, and how scientific ambition, when untethered from ethics, becomes a weapon. The legacy of MK Ultra is not just historical, it is a cautionary tale. It invites us to question how many other secrets lie buried beneath redacted memos and destroyed archives. It warns that even democratic governments can betray the principles they claim to uphold. As new technologies emerge, artificial intelligence, neurotechnology, data surveillance, the questions raised by MK Ultra are more relevant than ever. Who is watching? Who is experimenting? Who decides what is acceptable in the name of progress or security? Because in the end, MK Ultra is more than a story of the past. It is a mirror held up to the future. And the reflection it offers depends on whether we choose transparency over secrecy, ethics over ambition, and humanity over